he's from Dairygold, kind of checking out the class to see if it adds value to his organization. So, you know, why I'm teaching this class. Well, when we all got together and said, oh, a management training series would be great, and who wants to do the things, effective team meetings came up last, and so I drew the short straw. But I have a feeling it's because I was the one initially that needed so much self-help. You know, it seems like whenever you teach something, you get better at it. So it forced me to take a look at the meetings that I had been in, helped me to think about why some of them make me feel really good, and others I walk out going, this is so bad. So what we're going to hopefully do is, before we get started, I'd like to know your role in meetings. How many of you end up being facilitators in meetings? So you either call the meeting or you conduct the meeting. Okay, good. How many of you are primarily participants? The rest? Okay. Both of them have significant responsibility, and we tend to think about our facilitators as having the most responsibility. But have you ever been in that meeting when everybody shows up, maybe it's Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and there's just not enough coffee in the room to keep everybody going, and you're trying to pull something out of someone, and it's so hard? That really gets us to our responsibility as participants. I was, as we were thinking about our personality types, and this poor girl has to try and keep up with me. So, as I was thinking about our personality types, the average meeting has 7 to 10 people in them. And you're going to get a couple of D's, a couple of I's, a C, an S, whatever that is. So our meeting dynamics are also driven by the dynamics of the individuals in the meeting. So, with that said, I think we'll just dive in. Can you shut down the lights just a little bit, but not much? That's perfect. So we have an official agenda, but I think we could stray a bit from it. Does that make sense? Because we really want to focus on what you need and how we can help do that. There are going to be some tools, and I think the tools will be really helpful. For me, those tools proved to be kind of a game changer. Particularly in my latest role, I've always dealt internationally at the Northern European level primarily. Everybody speaks English relatively well. There's multiple accents, but people speak English very well. My new role, I deal primarily with people in South and Central America. And we generally do that through virtual meetings. Something that I learned early on is that if I don't send an agenda out, and a well thought out agenda before we get started, most of them are trying to translate in their minds what I'm saying. But that same thing is true if everyone is English speaking in the room. So I think agenda has been the biggest game changer for me, and not that I didn't do them, but that I actually thought about what I put on the agenda. Oops, wrong computer. And then we want to spend some time managing difficult meeting dynamics. Follow-up, a few thoughts on conference calls. We'll take a look at what really does make an effective meeting, and we're going to do a practice session. It can, at the end. So I wanted to do a little bit, I think I have many of those logical tendencies myself, and so I wanted to go find some information about the average meeting. And I stumbled across this research paper that was perfect. And I would really like to meet the researchers, because they said things like, a meeting is an interaction where the unwilling, selected from the uninformed, led by the unsuitable to discuss the unnecessary, are required to write a report about the unimportant. And then another quote that he had was, a meeting is a gathering where people speak up, say nothing, and then all disagree. And I think we've all been in some of those meetings. However, the bottom line is the reason that we have meetings is we all need have a common goal. Many times we're not in the same part of the organization. We need to share information with one another, we need to learn from one another, and we need to go out of there and be able to meet the company objectives. That's generally why we have meetings. But many times, because we don't necessarily have firmly in our minds what we want to come out of the meeting, we sometimes stumble. So I had thought about, for our icebreaker, and it's kind of ironic, it's so cold outside and we're talking about icebreakers, had kind of thought about revamping the 2 truths and a lie and making them be about the meetings we have attended. So coming up with 2 truths about meetings that we have attended and 1 not truth about meetings that we've attended. But I think we'll save that, and we're going to just dive right in. And I would like us to maybe take a little bit of time and have you tell me about some of the most effective things that you've seen in meetings and some of the least effective things that you find in meetings. So if we could just take 5 minutes and we'll use the board. Can anybody, all of us need to, tell me some effective things that you find in meetings that you really appreciate.
Examples.
Examples, okay. Other effective things in a meeting.
Expectations.
Expectations. Why am I here? Very good. Expectations. Others.
Follow up.
Follow up. Yes.
Clear agenda.
Clear agenda. A roadmap. Okay, others.
Staying on point.
Staying on point. So now let's do the flip side. Is there anything that really pushes your buttons? We could say probably the opposite of all of these, but are there others out there that you go, okay, I'm really disengaged now?
Debates that go on for too long.
Can you see this?
No.
Okay, so we'll just kind of do debates that go on too long. How many have seen situations where we keep revisiting the same decision? We thought we made that decision last meeting, and here it is again. Slightly different flavor, but here it is again. And so you walk out of the second meeting going, well, I guess we haven't accomplished too much after that. So the continual revisiting of decisions, which gets to that debate situation again. Other things about meetings.
Distractions, people leaving their room, cell phones, laptops.
Distractions. Distractions, yes. So you have the group that whatever's going on in the meeting can't possibly be as important as what's going on their cell phone, right? That group. Others. I think this is a good thing to get us started. So we're going to jump right in and say there is a profile of the typical meeting in corporate America. And they are staff meetings. 45% of them are staff meetings. They're held in the company conference room. They start at 11 a.m. Interesting. They last 1.5 hours. They're generally on Mondays and Fridays. They involve 9 people. They have 2 managers, 4 coworkers, 2 subordinates, and 1 outsider. We generally have 2 hours warning for a staff meeting. And no advanced written agenda. So that is what happens in corporate America. And lest we think we're alone, I thought this was really interesting. So they used the formula that we're gonna use to kind of evaluate how you're doing on your costing of your meetings. But they were saying the annual cost for high-tech corporations in meetings is senior executives, and this is $485,000, middle $720,000, junior $936. So the weekly cost of meetings in the average company, high-tech company, is $2.14 million in meetings. And the estimated efficiency is 47%. So when you think about, is there a great opportunity for us to improve in corporate America, it would be to improve our decision-making and our meeting process. So, with that said, we're going to just blaze right in here. And I'm going to tell you about a meeting that I almost died in. So we were doing a computer, getting a new ERP system, and we were battling over what it was going to look like, what functionality we would have. And it was about 4 o'clock and on another continent, so I was really tired. I went to the window to sit, to kind of get some fresh air, and almost fell out the window because I almost fell asleep. Meetings can be dangerous. And I'm using that, but they can also be very dangerous to your career if you don't manage meetings well. So I want you to think about the impact of meetings on your career. So for those of you who are facilitators, what are the primary meetings that you're focused on? Over here, I saw Isabel. Do you conduct meetings?
Rarely.
Rarely. But I saw, Julie, you do conduct meetings.
Yes, sometimes.
And what are they primarily, of these type of meetings, what would you say they are?
Mostly like update.
Status meeting, update, information meetings, decision-making meetings, and some of those can be, we think of them as being very formal, but how many times do we get together when something runs amok to see how we're going to fix it? You bring 4 or 5 people in, we need a damage control meeting, we need a decision-making meeting, we need to move on this. And so, in my opinion, this is not really probably the formal definition of meetings, but I even consider 2 people a meeting. Sometimes they say, okay, it has to have at least 3, but I consider 2 people a meeting, especially when you've got technology that's involved with that. So, technology can and is used to conduct meetings in every one of these meeting types. Now, Randy brought up the distractions. Technology brings its own set of distractions, doesn't it? You've got everybody on the conference call, and then suddenly somebody drops off, and they come back on. And then not everybody starts at the same time, and then somebody's thing isn't on mute. And so technology brings its own set of meeting management challenges, and so we like to cover those as well. So the meeting that we hold the most is the update or status meeting, and we saw that where they said, okay, that's a staff meeting. Did you notice in there that they said for our staff meetings, which we know we're going to have them, people generally had 2 hours warning on this. No written agenda. 9 people in there, let's just, for easy figuring, say they're $50 a piece, so we've got $450 worth of time in this 1 hour meeting, essentially, that we're trying to get at least 2.5 times return on our investment for that. And quite frankly, I think that's something that we never need to forget. If we can do something that solves a problem, or so we never have that problem, most meetings will pay for themselves very quickly. So we have information meetings, decision-making meetings, damage control, brainstorming, personnel meetings. Now, you mentioned that Marina, you mentioned that you were looking forward to the performance review class. Personnel meetings are some that need to be planned very, very, very well. Pitch sessions, shareholder meetings, stand-up or scrum meetings. So you guys in the warehouse over here, do you have a lot of stand-up meetings where you just get, something's not going or you need to find inventory or something and so you
Well, we
just...
do a stand-up once a month with all of our employees. Usually there's a safety topic that goes along with it, so there's, go through the safety topic, then we just call it a crew meeting, and then it's more of just kind of updating or, adding any information that they don't know
Mhm.
or need to know that we're trying to put out there.
And how does standing up help with that meeting?
Well, we just, because everybody clocks in and then we're right there, so everybody comes up and you're able to go through it really fairly quickly, and then usually there's not a whole lot of questions, there's always some, and then we answer those and then they get right to work.
These are starting to be implemented more and more, the whole stand-up meeting concept. But also, just, by the time you bring everybody into a meeting room, you get them all sat down, you say, hi, how are you, how was your weekend? 15 minutes are gone. Where if you go right to wherever the situation is, you talk about it and resolve it, you may have already shortened that by 15 minutes and been much more effective. So not everything needs to have a conference room and that type of setting. So have any of you ever been involved in a meeting that requires knowledge of Robert's Rules of Order? So these are primarily things like school boards, government type meetings, that type of thing. This one is a whole different set of how we run meetings. Interestingly enough, Robert's rules were originally developed in 1876. They've continued and continued and been revised, and the latest revision is 2011. I had not ever been involved with them, and I thought it would be a good thing if I would be on the school board. And that was really an introduction to me in there are rules to how we get to decisions in those types of things. And in fact, the rules on decisions are actually used to help us get to decisions that people want. Does that make sense? So the things like you need a second. Somebody brings up an idea, you need a second, it can die for lack of second. People use the rules to change what happens in a meeting. And for me, that was the first realization that if I were very, very, very smart at meetings and running meetings, that you can direct the outcome of those meetings. Does that make sense? Instead of walking in and saying, okay, we need to discuss, we're going to have cutbacks. We need to discuss how we're going to do that. You open it up and there's going to be a lot of feelings about that, right? If you come in with some things already channeled so you can help, how are we going to manage the personnel part of this? How are we going to manage the work part of this? How are we going to... So if you have done your homework on that agenda part, you actually already have set the stage for that to be a much different outcome. So that's hopefully what we're going to do in this next about 90 minutes. And I have this, it's kind of an ineffective meeting. How not to run a meeting.
Corporate messaging for stakeholders should utilize out-of-the-box re-synergizing of key market drivers.
That's me. I had a date that night too. These days, we've all learned how to survive meetings.
We hired an outside consultant to do an analysis of our outside consultant
There are many tricks you can use to stay awake, like deep pondering.
How many toothpicks are there in the world?
If you welded non-stick baking sheets into a bobsled and slid down Mount Everest, how fast could you go?
Then there are the feats of mental strength. 358 dots, 359 dots, 360 dots, 300.
My best friend's stepbrother's middle name was Horace.
And of course, long meetings allow opportunities for secret self-improvement.
Back and together, back and together, back and together. Yeah, I'm gonna be a star in my dance class. Ooh.
Wouldn't you agree, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
If the boss keeps talking, I'm definitely getting to level 14.
My favorite technique? Pretending to pay full attention. My secret? Noses. Look at each person's nose one at a time. It seems like you're paying attention and making lots of eye contact, and noses are pretty interesting when you look at them closely. They're like snowflakes, each one unique. Also, nod knowingly every time the boss uses a 3-syllable word or larger.
Shareholders won't abide any lackadaisicality on the part of our executive team. The bottom line is, in the final analysis, at the end of the day, is that it is what it is. I need to give this presentation to some of the other branches at the end of the month, and I need somebody to write it up. Can you do that for me? Thanks.
Working and working to stay awake should be different. Let's have shorter, more...
So, if you get nothing out of this, the noses thing could help, looking right in their noses and trying to stay on there. Seriously, I think we've all had at times where we were not as engaged in the meeting as we should. Whether it was because of us or because of the meeting or both, we've all been there. So our task today is to help us change that dynamics in those meetings. So these are informal stats. You find them all over, but it's 79% rated meetings as run terribly, 14% rated meetings as run fairly well, 7% rated meetings as run extremely well. So we have a lot of opportunity for improvement. Don't fall into the bad statistics category. A well-run meeting is a way to get increased respect in your career. So I think that's something that we need to underline, and we need to. There's nothing that probably is certainly confusing. Nothing. That's not really the case. If you can't manage a meeting, it definitely questions your credibility to manage a department. So it is important to be able to run the meetings well. So, let me just go in here. So productive meetings are necessary to serve a purpose, deliver results, effective time, use of time. Non-productive, they fail to produce results, take more time than should be required, and often are characterized by conflict, confusion, and lack of preparation and engagement. So is there anyone in here that has a bad example of a meeting they can share with us? Maybe at Winco you have good examples, so we're good. But I have run into some of them where we came out of meetings being more in conflict than when we went in. And then that drives the behavior of the meeting before the meeting, so that you can get your who's on my side and who's not. Or the meeting after the meeting, and that's where the business all takes place. Both of those are extremely damaging, because there are decisions made in the meeting that the other part of the group is thinking we're marching forward under. And if we then change it through and then we cite these, the morale the whole outcome of why we had the meeting changes. So really, truly, meetings are important. They are necessary, and there are ways that we can make them very productive. So meetings are a fact of life, make them productive. For managers, they say that about 69 to 79% of your time will be spent in meetings, and about 45% of that will be non-clinical. And I find that to be very true. Do you find that to be pretty close? Keep in mind, a meeting is anything with 2 people or more. So a formula for an effective meeting. Spend 2 times as much as you usually do on the agenda and who should attend. Okay? So spend a lot of time. What is my agenda? Who really needs to be with? And half the amount of your normal time in a meeting. Okay? So if it was going to be an hour and a half, you spend 2 times on the agenda and the attendees, and you spend 45 minutes in the meeting itself. And then you have 100% of the post-meeting follow-up. Because that's where most of our meetings just tend to die. We had the meeting, we have a bunch of actions, but we never really follow up on the actions. We never ensure that, first of all, the notes don't always get out promptly, if they get out at all. And then the follow-up on that is not as good as it should be. So please do keep this in mind. Spend twice as much time planning. Why do I want to have this meeting in the first place? Who really needs to be there? How can I make this more efficient so it doesn't take an hour and a half, it takes 45 minutes? And how can I ensure that everything that we discussed in that meeting, we follow up and make sure that it happens? So we implement. Do not start late. There's a group in that they start watching the clock at 5 till. And the meeting has already gone downhill if it starts at 1 minute. And they get frustrated with the ones that come in late. Now, use a roadmap to stay on track, but what is our roadmap? Our agenda. We use our agenda to stay on track. And consider standing if appropriate, short meetings. So about a year and a half ago, I went to a back doctor and they said, you sit too much. That was no surprise. So I got a stand-up desk. And for about the first week, I thought, I don't think I can think and stand up. I mean, you know, you're used to sitting over and hunching over and typing. And what I found is over time, I really liked it much better standing than sitting. And many times now, instead of, like I say, bringing everyone in, we'll walk to a desk or we'll walk out on the floor and we'll have the meeting right there, where the stuff is right in front of us, where we can see what needs to be accomplished, and rather than calling everybody into a room. And so if there are opportunities to stand and make it more physical, then do that. For formal meetings, make sure that you have a facilitator. And it doesn't always have to be you. So if you're the one leading the meeting, but you would rather watch the dynamics of the meeting, you would rather make sure the meeting stays on task, then find someone, maybe it's one of your Ds, maybe not. Find someone that feels very comfortable leading the discussion. Also make sure that you're not trying to be the facilitator and the note taker at the same time. Just ask someone if they can take notes. If you have no one that can take notes and you have one note, there is the little functionality in there where you can record the meeting right in OneNote. And then if you actually start typing notes, it brings you right back to that thing where you were the meeting in OneNote. So, but don't try and do both because you'll miss things. So, as the facilitator, you're not only directing the discussion, you're trying to read the body language if you're in a room. If you're on a phone call, you're trying to draw out the comments from the ones that you never hear. So from the quiet one in wherever. So, Maria, how do you feel about this? Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share with us? So, facilitating is a role that should be taken very seriously. So, actionable agendas are the key. So, what is an actionable agenda? So it's relevant, it's realistic, it's organized, and it's tangible. Okay? And all of these are, what we're going to do is we're going to use a tool. I kind of developed this to help us. And it's been, so I've had this tool for a year, and it's made a real difference in the meetings that I'm doing. Creating an actionable agenda requires two types of templates. The physical kind, which is used to document the agenda, which that's the deliverable, and the logical kind, which provides a structured plug-and-play process for agenda development. So most of us have corporate templates, or we can go and get a template for a meeting agenda off of Microsoft. That is still a necessary thing. That's filled out after the thought process, okay? It is not a tool that we use to create the agenda. So, this is how I look at agendas now, and like I say, it's really made a big difference. So the first thing I always start with is, what is the purpose? What's the business need and priority? What are the results expected, and what are the time requirements? Why do you think you would start there, instead of putting together a list of things that we want to talk about? It identifies if you really need a meeting or not. Maybe it's an email, or maybe it's a call. So really, what is the purpose of this? We want to determine why our on-time orders are slipping. So our business need is that, why are on-time orders slipping? What are the results expected? That our on-time performance will improve. That's our results. What are the time requirements? It depends on what we have to discuss to get the results that we want to include. So then, once we get that scope, it defines the meeting requirements, the information to be presented. What is our on-time performance? What are the contributing factors to our on-time performance? So then the issues to be discussed could be, why are we having a hard time getting something from somewhere? So one of our suppliers. The problems to be solved and the decisions required. Now sometimes you may not know all of this information. But this also helps you determine who should be there, right? What's the standard procedure for inviting people to meetings? Invite those you need plus 3 or 4 more so they don't feel offended. Because we have this group over here that they just want to be part of the team, right? That means if I'm not in the meeting, I'm not part of the team. Why am I not part of the team? There is some that actually think along those lines. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that everyone in that room contributes to what we want to accomplish. Okay? So then from these right here are agenda components, the facts and information, who's the participants, the time allocation, and the presentation material. So all of those are then, once you've got this all outlined, you just plop it in your agenda. Whatever template you use, you just plop it in. At the same time, put it in, and I provided another template. You might have one that works as well. Put it in so that you just have, here's the actions we need to be taken, here's who's responsible, and this is when they're due. So that everything that you could possibly do in the meeting is done in the meeting rather than finding time after that meeting to try and get everything put together. If you have an 8-hour meeting, it means you're going to spend 12 hours afterwards getting everything organized and back together. If you haven't got a really good note taker, and if you haven't taken some time to organize that. So then you determine where the meeting needs to be held, you get the meeting plan in place, and then finally you get the meeting closure. So that seems like easy stuff, is it? So facilitating the meeting. How many times have you been sidetracked by either being too hot or too cold? You're really stuck. You know, I always wear a jacket every place I go because I'm sitting there. I am so cold. What am I hearing? I'm not hearing much from the meeting. I am so cold, or I'm so hot. So make sure that the environment is conducive to maintaining people's attention. Logistics and room requirements, it's always nice if you make sure that everybody has a place and that they have all the information they need. They all have agendas. They all have everything necessary. I really like it when somebody is thoughtful enough to make sure that there's extra pens and that type of thing in case something needs them. So there is a thing online that really does a great job about facilitating. Now, HR, our HR people. I know you're not HR. I heard that dialogue when you came in. What types of meetings do you have to have?
In my role, we hardly have any meetings.
Okay.
I mean, I have a lot of, I guess if you count 2 people, I mean, I have a lot of phone conversations.
That's a meeting.
So, and then in my role, we have a lot of team meetings as far as keeping consistent any changes, making sure that we're all on the same page, everyone's understanding any changes to the law, how it's going to impact the company.
Very good. So those are informational primarily, not necessarily decision-making. But it's very important that everyone gets all of that information. Very good. Over here, finance, right? Your finance? No?
I'm loss prevention.
Why did I put that slide? Lost. What type of meetings do you have?
They're typically informational. We present, kind of redirect everybody back to the same page. My people are spread out over 3 states and 20 different areas, so maintaining consistency, keeping everybody up to date on the direction of our department is typically why we gather.
What type of meetings do you generally have? In person or?
Once a year we get together in person, and then throughout the year periodically we're on the phone on conference calls.
Great, thank you for sharing that. You shared your type of meetings. Back here, low, IT, correct? And
Correct.
IT focus. And so are you, right? What type of meetings do you have?
They're very similar to Kirby's. I've got techs spread out also over 3 states. They're all phone conversations. Biggest challenge listening is people not listening. You'll talk to them, you'll tell them what's going on, it's more informational based, and talk to them later on. I'm surprised, you never told us that. Yeah, we did.
We didn't know we were changing.
So,
So do you ever have to deal much with your stakeholders? Do you meet with, so say finance needs something. Do you meet with that stakeholder, or are you more the one sharing that information?
periodically, we'll meet with the different departments on what they'll need from either the store level or the divisional office. They'll give me information, I'll pass that out to techs. But those are more, still meeting, but they're not in a group setting. One, I'll call it that individual or that couple of individuals say, hey, we need to get this for.
So I would say you might have a little bit of a challenge if you have too many like me. Because when somebody from IT starts to talk to me, I think, oh, okay, just make it happen. And so you probably have a challenge helping us understand those things that are important for us to know, correct?
Sometimes there are some challenges.
Yes, I would think there could be. So I have learned that about myself, so I try and be more engaged, quite frankly. Because when people start talking about tables and where they get that information from that table, it's like, I don't know, I don't care where you get the information, I just need the information. So I'm trying to, because in that explanation is part of the reason why it's difficult or it's easy to do. And so for me, that's one of the things that I've had to start thinking is, okay, I'm going to this place where I need to stop and think about what people are telling me, what information is being shared.
As a facilitator, I think you have to think about that as well, though. You have to think about people's agendas and need to know and,
Yes.
I mean, we have small staff meetings and there's never a formal exactly agenda, but I mean, for me, I have an agenda of my own in those meetings. And that's typically to present information on.
That's interesting, you should.
It's like a lobbying thing for me of, I know we made this policy and I know you didn't give us any directives and I'm gonna, you know, if I don't feel I'm being listened to, then I'm gonna use that opportunity for every meeting to bring an example from my work week of why that isn't working.
She
And that's what I
probably,
do.
you know, so there's one of those, put that in a bubble and remember that. Everybody in that room has their own agenda. And if you don't drive the agenda, somebody else's will, okay? So that was probably, take away from the meeting, what Beth said was one of them. Make sure you're aware of the agendas in the room. Thank you for sharing yours. Are there other things about the meetings that you, are there problems that, do you ever run into any problems or conflicts in the meetings? Or is it pretty much, here's what we have to do, how are we going to do it?
We don't, we have staff meetings similar to Beth's team, and we don't have set agendas for them. It's more or less, I mean, there might be some things as far as this law is going to pass and this is how it's going to impact. And we always make sure that any new changes are addressed first and foremost, and then it's what issues are you having? You know, is this a global issue? Is it a one? Let's just make a decision issue. And so, yeah, each one of the team members will bring their own agenda, so to speak, and we will discuss anything that we need to, but there's no formal agenda, I guess.
Okay. So are you more like Kirby where you're, you have people spread out all over, or are you all in one place?
All in one place.
Now, Julie, what about your meetings? Can you tell us a little bit about your meetings, the dynamics of them, the information shared in that?
We have like good meetings once in a while. It's not like every week or every 2 weeks, but we have meetings when we have the need for it, and we usually just update the team on certain things that are happening, or sometimes get their feedback and then come up with a solution for some issues, and then we implement that.
And are yours all in one site, or are they spread out?
Oh, we're all together.
Because in Kirby's situation over here, what Beth brought up about the agendas, if I'm at a different site, do I have a site agenda? I do generally have a site agenda, as well as the departmental agenda as well. So, Randy, right? Gus, yes. So what about your meetings?
Got all different types, staff meetings, corporate meetings basically all on a phone call, different people from different plants. Meetings, BPMs with people on the floor that actually communicate the thing that's going on. Some of it's production issue meetings, what we're gonna do for a schedule going forward, just all different sorts.
So everything from very operational and tactical to all the way to corporate. Is there an area that you feel like that you would like to know more about, that in those meetings it could make them better?
We just started a new process where we're gonna be implementing a different way of thinking. It's gonna be more of a employee-driven base, so we're trying to get that information out. I'm actually facilitating it, so that would be helpful, because we're very vague in what we're doing because we're just learning our process ourselves. So we don't have all the information yet.
So perhaps moving more from a top-down to a bottom-up approach in terms of how we do improvements and stuff like that. It's Chloe, right? How about you? Your experience with meetings?
I think ours are probably a lot like Julie's, where it's every once in a while, if there's no time set on them. I think we have a lot of little ones, probably a lot throughout the week, really, with just like a few people here and there where we discover something that's going on, where these people need to know about this information. I think a lot of times where we might fail is not getting the information out to everybody, and it's like, well, we talked about that. No, I wasn't there.
Do you know there is a rule of thumb that how close you are to someone is how much you communicate to them? So if you're in the office next door, you're 10 times more likely to communicate with them than you are with somebody 150 feet away. And then as you get in a different building, a different site, so you communicate really well with the people that you're close to. Then you bring up a very good thing that, oh, I thought we all knew that. And particularly things like procedures, or when things happen on the computer that you need to do them a specific way, those types of things are very helpful for everybody to know, but we oftentimes don't share that information when we know. So thank you, because these help us understand kind of the roles that you're playing and what things that you could pick up to make you a better meeting facilitator and also a meeting participant. For those times when you are a meeting participant, come prepared. Okay? If the agenda is sent out, look at the agenda and do some background on the topics. If you are prepared, you can direct the outcome of the meeting. And that's really the whole hope of when we gather a group of people in the room, that they come prepared, ready to participate, and ready to change the organization. I don't know how many times in all of our careers we've been to that meeting where it's 8 a.m. and the meeting after the meeting, i.e., what went on after, bled over to 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning, and everybody rolls in. And it's important things that need to be discussed in those meetings, but nobody has the energy to discuss them. So be aware that as a participant in a meeting, you have a tremendous responsibility. So jumping back, if you're the facilitator, these are some things that you need to be very much aware of. So just recently, like last summer, we decided that we needed to set up some focus groups in the different sites. So there was one in California, one in Oregon, 2 in Parma, and then 2 off-site, meaning all the salespeople. And the hope was that we could get better participation in the 2016 employee survey. Not because we want better numbers, but we want to hear more voices. So a little bit about the organization that I work in. We were pretty much autonomous, this autonomous seed company that was part of Bayer until the last 2 or 3 years. And we have now moved into Bayer, the aspirin company. We've been a part of them for almost 7 years, but now it's our brand now. Everything's changed. Our HR is now Bayer instead of our local HR. So the last survey that was sent out, not as many people responded as they had in the past, because the thought process was, will they really know our voice? So we were asked to go around and meet in each one of these areas with a focus group and ask them how we can improve the survey results at each one of the sites. These sites vary significantly from being very production-driven, so very manufacturing, to being R&D, to being sales-driven. So the focus for each one of those was much different, and also the dynamics. I was the facilitator, and I learned as much as I think anybody in the room. Just seeing how different the group dynamics were in those different groups. So for the facilitator, it's critical that they understand the goals of the meeting and the organization, because this is the one that's going to be facilitating, guiding, managing some of those difficult personality types, managing difficult dynamics. And when you're the facilitator, you need to be very aware of everything we talked about here, and everything about a team has a personality as well, okay? And a meeting has a personality as well. So you keep the group on the agenda and moving forward. You involve everyone in the meeting. You draw out the quiet participants, and you control the domineering ones. And you ensure responsible decision-making, and awareness is critical, okay? So, is there anyone in this room that feels like, I love to be the facilitator? Beth, maybe? Isabel, would you? You know, sometimes the facilitator is a tough one, because this one is leading, directing, and watching the dynamics. Because often the quiet ones are the ones with the best statements, the best decision-making, the best comments, but they never provide them. So you have to be able to try and pull those out if you can. So here's this facilitator that's trying to be very into the group, very in control of the meeting. So when you are the facilitator, be prepared. And if you do this well, it makes a difference in your career, okay? If you do facilitating well, it makes a difference. Okay. I think there's one more. So we talked about these. I don't know that we need to go over them one by one, because you do have this presentation and will have this presentation. But start on time. Welcome everyone, and if introductions need to be made, do make them. And many times we'll know everybody in the room, so you can switch it up a bit and say, what do you feel like is the most important thing that we covered while we're here? That gets everybody's agenda out on the table right there. Review your agenda, the objectives and the ground rules. If you are going into something very heated, you may need to lay out the ground rules is that this will not get personal. We will talk about what is happening, what needs to be discussed, but this will not be a discussion about this person or this individual. That's for another time and place. This is about getting something done. Hopefully we don't have too many of those. Encourage participation. Stick to the agenda, but don't be, I'm trying to think of a politically correct way to say this. Don't be that agenda person that, oh, we spent 10 minutes on this, move on. We spent 12 minutes on this, move on. When you are 2 minutes away from getting a good decision. Does that make sense? If you're not, then something needs to be parked and additional comments and another, heaven forbid, meeting come off of that. But if you're 2 minutes away from something good, don't, for the sake of the agenda, stop it right there. Avoid detailed decision-making, seek commitments, bring closure, respect everyone's rights, be flexible, summarize the meeting results, and then either follow up, thank the participants, and close the meeting. Most of our meetings are unsuccessful because of this as well, the follow-up. So, tips. Never memorize a script. Always know your information about it. Does that make sense? But never go by a script. watch the group's body language. And you know, they give us a lot of tips on how to do that. Like, supposedly if I'm doing this, I'm disengaged, right? It could also be freezing. It could also be freezing. You could also be a little bit intimidated. You know, so watch the body dynamics. I also think that watch the cell phone usage and do require, where possible, that we turn off our cell phones and our texting. Sometimes that is not possible, but wherever possible, try to make your meeting shorter, and get everybody engaged, and then go back in, rather than drawing it out and always having, because what's happening is, I'm doing this, but what are you doing? You're going, she is not paying attention. I am so upset. We're supposed to be in this meeting, and she's, so there's two of us that aren't paying attention, right now? The one that's texting and the one that's frustrated with texting. So always check back with the group. Never assume that you know what people are thinking. Be aware of your own behavior. Occupy your hands. Watch your speech. Use body language of your own. And don't talk to the wall. And many times, we love PowerPoint presentations. I also hate them. Because I find myself talking to the computer instead of looking at your faces. Or talking to the computer in the meeting. So do be aware that a PowerPoint can become a crutch. And we've all had death by PowerPoint, right? We just see if they talk any slower and there's any more slides. So do be aware. So this is actually my favorite part of the training. Because now we don't talk so much about the topic, but we go into managing difficult meeting dynamics and behaviors, or what to do with meeting hijackers. We have them. We have been. I have been every one of these. And this is where this came from. I would highly suggest, it's a quick little blog, that you check that out. Because that one is a very nice thing. So, the talker. And this guy says, you know what I'm talking about. People who think talking is the same thing as contributing. And on a bad day, I'm that guy. Okay? So the talker. And believe it or not, us informational types really can be the talkers because we think everybody loves information as much as we do. But not everybody wants to know all of the details. They just want to know the numbers that impact them. So even the quiet ones that are the information types can sometimes fall into that talker category. The boss. The person may or may not actually be the boss. But they are the one that always talks over the person, the other people. And he's looking at how this meeting can increase his political stature. The sire. So, the sire. Throwing their pen down. You know, here we are again. Exactly, you know? The sire. We have been that, we have seen that. But do realize that that is difficult behavior that needs to be managed.
How'd they figure out it was typically a guy?
I don't know.
I'd like to see the statistic if I could, please.
You're serious. I know. This was a guy writing this article, so maybe he's just kind of got a bias there himself. The lurker. Watch out for this one. They sit in the meeting, and they don't participate a lot. They offer a really great opinion at the end of the meeting. And in most cases, they're harmless. In some cases, I think, why am I not that person? Because they sit back there and they process all the information, and at the end, they give a really good suggestion. And you go, wow, okay. So this one, the stealth learner. He's the one who says nothing for the whole meeting and then offers a single quietly stated opinion near the end. Then, no matter what everyone else agreed on, his plan gets implemented. How did it happen? Who knows? This guy has some power you don't understand. Get to know him. And I actually worked with a guy like this. He would sit where Julie's sitting, and he'd generally lean up against the wall, and he'd just kind of sit there, always engaged, nodding and all that, but not a lot of participation. And then in the end, he'd come up with this brilliant plan. It would be implemented, and I'd be thinking, dang it, I should have been leaned up over in that corner, talking less and thinking more. So, the meander. How many of you have ever seen this one emerge? The one that is like the talker, except he meanders all over and creates long, drawn-out metaphors that nobody understands. And the killer aims to destroy other people rather than winning arguments or getting his way. This guy is annoying but not really dangerous since he is easily recognized. The real strategy is to put him in another meeting with another killer and then get them arguing and excuse yourself. So I would encourage you to read this because it has some humor. But the bottom line is he does a good job of identifying that in every meeting, and when you get a group of people together, you get profiles. And if you're the facilitator, you need to read the profiles, and if you're the participant, you probably want to check and make sure you're not being one of these types. And then, this is my favorite. Productive, reasonable contributor. You get 3 of these people together in a meeting, you should change the topic to quitting and starting a new company. This is the blogger's approach. But really, truly, the productive, reasonable contributor is what we're all aiming to be and what we're trying to get out of our other participants. So, remember when we talked about the agenda and who should attend? What if you already know you have one of these profiles? The dominator. Some of the things that you need to think about, you just don't go, oh, that's Dallas, or that's Dawn, or that's Susan, or that's whatever, is you need to be thinking how you're going to manage that meeting before you get in there. One time I thought I was being so smart. I thought, okay, what if I'm making the note taker? Because they have to be focused on taking the notes. And you know what happened? There were no notes. No notes. It was a failure. So if that's one that you're thinking about, that is a strategy I tried and it didn't work because it wasn't in keeping with their personality. But if you know you've got one of those, you already know that you're going to have to control that. Or if you've got a meander. That's the one that tells you the color of the sky, the time of day, everything else, and they have a really great point, and you need to be able to draw out that point. So, thoughts on managing negative situations and behaviors. First of all, for me, they always hit me by surprise. I always go, oh, I don't think I saw that. So you have to think on your feet. So there's no one-size-all-fits approach. Scott brought up this morning some really good things about, so how can I use some of the things I've learned to help me manage some of these situations? But in the end, you are talking about people, you are talking about situations, and if you are talking about dynamics of meetings, particularly meetings, say for example, you're in a meeting, and wind code doesn't fall into this because it would be more, a little different, but say you're in a meeting where you have to close facilities or close departments. People already come into that with emotion, right? Sometimes even something as simple as a benefit meeting can take on dynamics, because it's like, instead of us focusing on having benefits, which tends to be, I just saw one of these in person about 6 months ago. Instead of focusing on we're lucky to have benefits, it's that something's being taken away. So do be aware that there could be dynamics around those types of things. Even those things where you're talking about changing a procedure that somebody does all the time. Well, I always do this and it works for me, but now you're telling me I have to change it, it doesn't make sense in my mind. So be aware of that. So here are some typical behaviors and some potential ways of solving them. In my mind, they're just too canned, but they're good solutions, suggestions. And what we're going to do at the end is we're going to do two, I don't know if they're assignments, but one of them is we're going to use that agenda planner to plan a meeting. And you can choose the meeting type, okay? So we'll divide up in 3 or 4 groups. You will choose a meeting type and you'll use that agenda planner to plan. Then the next one is really to talk about how you would manage, or some thoughts about managing behaviors. So if we get, is there anybody in here that loves to role play? Beth. Yeah, good. You had to have more than Beth, because she can't just play all roles at once. So we'll do a little bit, we're going to do some role playing. I'm going to ask some of you to be the dominator, the meanderer, those types of things, and ask a colleague to kind of be the facilitator and to help pull this back where it needs to be. So we'll do about 3 of those. So could I get someone to maybe read the first 4 bullet points and then somebody else read the next 4? So if we could start off with David and Kirby. Kirby, could you read the first, 4 or 5 bullet points, and then David, could you just read the next ones?
Take all.
And then David will discuss.
Okay. Stop the person, thank him or her, and say that you'd like to hear from someone else. Call attention to the agenda and the time frame. Break eye contact, move away from the person. Stop giving him or her your focused attention. Move closer and closer to the person, maintaining eye contact. With him or her. Problematic behavior will start to stand out, leaving the person. Summarize what the person has said and move on to someone else.
Give the person a time limit before the discussion starts. Pose a standard for the length of comments. For example, let's hear from a few people for no more than 2 minutes each. When you know in advance that an individual or individuals tend to dominate a group, propose a ground rule at the beginning of the session that everyone monitor the airtime. Explain that for some, this means talking less, for others it means talking more. Introduce an inclusion activity to get everyone's participation.
So some of these I had questions about, because a D personality thinks, what about rule?
They don't.
They apply to everyone but me. So good that you're giving everybody time limits, because I'll need to talk. And I was thinking, as Kirby was reading this, how close is close enough before you get too close and they stop talking, invading their space. Think about some of these and do realize that behaviors, we can direct behaviors and be aware of them, but find a couple that work for you. So I found this great tool. Can I get somebody to demo this with me a bit? Ren, would you do that? Just need to stand here. And I don't know if it's gonna work or not, but when I step up to you this close, what do you do? You're supposed to stand back.
Normal people, yes, personal space.
So there was this woman that she demonstrated this, but she didn't show us what she was doing. She would talk to us and she would move one foot forward and she'd keep talking. The individual that she was talking to would move one foot back, you know, so she had people walking like this all over the room and not even knowing what they were doing. So thank you for doing that. But if you're into that kind of thing, you can actually use some of that. It does work, but some cultures don't have the same differences as we do. I mean, you know, like I'm a good arm length before I feel comfortable in people in this space. So for me to be able to walk people around the room, I've already got an arm length, right? For me to get over and try and get a D and get in their face, they're more likely to get in mine. Oh, good, she's over here to hear me better or something, you know. So for me, the best way is to get with them sooner and say, you have so many good ideas. Can you help me get so-and-so? Does that make sense? That for me works better than trying to manipulate it somehow in me. Sometimes you just have to say, time's up, thanks. Okay, so thank you both. Inserting personal agendas. Beth, would you read this one? It's a short one.
Ask the person how what he or she is saying relates to the current agenda item. Record the point, thank the person, and move on. Ask the person what he or she wants the group to do with the input, and give the person a time limit.
Is it highly likely that out of that personal agenda is a very good thing? It could easily be that what we're bringing into a meeting is stuff that people don't know and it needs to be resolved. So you can't let it hijack the meeting, but you shouldn't overlook it as well. Because sometimes the best things that come out of the meetings are not the things that you necessarily intended. Talking off subject. So, you know, when they said on a good day I'm not that guy and on a bad day I am that guy, this can be me so my mind bounces around a lot. So this can be me where I think about 10 other things. So could we get back row, Lowell, and I can't see your name, I should know it?
Madison.
Of course. Thank heavens you know your name. Could I get the two of you to read that one? So Lowell, cover the first three, and then if you'll cover the last two.
Sometimes people are out of sync with the agenda and regularly talk about things that are irrelevant to the group's task or are out of sequence with the agenda. Ask them to relate what they are saying to the current agenda. Ask if the group can come back to their point and record it on a parking lot sheet.
Ask others if they have anything to add to what the person said. Stop them. Tell them it's not appropriate now. Bring it up later or they're a different part of the agenda.
So I think all of these tend to be useful, but you have to use them tactfully. Having side conversations. These are interesting. So, back here, Min, Tracy, and Chloe, could you read those? Just two each, probably.
Invite them to share what is being said, stop the conversation, and quiet and let them talk.
Ask them to stop, ask if they would please join the group, move closer to the people having the side conversation.
Repeat the topic under discussion and ask if everyone can focus on having just one conversation at a time. Say, let's have one conversation, or let's all focus on the same thing. Point out the whispering or talking is distracting.
So this gets highly distracting when you're on a conference call and you have a large group in the meeting center and then you have satellites off and everyone in that conference area is talking and the ones in the satellite spots are trying to figure out what's the conversation and what isn't. So we really have an opportunity to realize when we're the ones having the side conversation, and then also using some of these to help us with that, managing that conversation. Being constantly negative, antagonistic, or presenting a hostile demeanor. Nothing is okay. Nothing will work. They always seem skeptical. Their negative expressions may either be verbal or nonverbal, okay? Now, I think we do need to acknowledge that some people are just, the glass is half empty and the glass is half full. So some individuals tend to take a look at the challenge more than they look at the opportunity. Others look at the opportunity more than they look at the challenge. Is there a need for both points of view? A group of optimists can get us to a place that maybe we shouldn't necessarily be, and a group of pessimists would get us to someplace else. So we really need to temper some of that with the decision-making process. However, some of this tends to be passive-aggressive behavior. Some things that I've dealt with in meetings that have come up are statements like, "What are you going to do about this?" And it's kind of like, it's not what I'm going to do about it, it's what we're going to do about this. But what that is it's transferring responsibility, right? It's saying, I'm lobbing the responsibility over to your court, and I don't want to be responsible for it. And as a facilitator, it's your job to lob it back over and say, yes, we're all responsible for this. So when you jump up and you see some of that passive-aggressive behavior, you need to deal with it. So, back row. Julie, could you read the first two? And Isabel, would you read the last three?
Sure. Acknowledge their points of view, make a special point of thoroughly paraphrasing their view. The first couple of times they speak, stick very close to their exact wording.
Point out the negative pattern, not in a group setting. Ask if there's any part of the work that they feel good about. Ask for their opinions about what is needed. Record the opinions. Ask the group to respond.
So I have a little bit of this in my own family. So my husband is very much one of those realists. And I tend to think, everything is possible. And he used to paraphrase his words with, the problem with this is. So I'd lay out an idea, and he would say, the problem with this is, and he would go on and relate some of the challenges that were there. They were valid. But what did that do to me?
Take down.
Yeah, it's like, I don't like to hear no. And anytime somebody says it, it's like, okay, we'll be seeing about that. So we had to talk, and I'd say, it sounds so much different if you would say, the challenge with this is. Or there's an opportunity or something else. Just change the words a little bit. It doesn't change what he's saying, but it changes what I'm hearing. And there are times when we need to hear what those challenges are. So I think I've shared this with this group. But one of the best mentors, bosses that I ever had, I have not worked for him for about 10 years now, but some things that he provided me have stuck with me for a long time. And one of them is this. When I would lay something out that he didn't fully buy into, instead of saying, whoa, he would say, help me understand. Do you know what that did to me? I still felt like there was buy-in there. And so I needed to explain it rather than get defensive. There's those statements right there, help me understand. Because it does say we're all on the same team, I just need more information rather than, I don't think that's such a good idea. And sometimes in the help me understand phase, I would be able to go, oh, I see there's a flaw in it. So using our words really does help us. Attacking, criticizing, and picking in our hopefully we don't run into this at all. Some people go after other members or the facilitator to argue or personally attack. Sometimes this is just counter-dependence, aimed at discrediting or trying to change what the group is doing. Describe non-judgmentally what the person is doing. Ask if the criticism or judgment is based on something that has occurred in the meeting. Stop any argument. Ask for and record a statement of each position. And ask the person what the group could do to respond to his or her concern. So some behaviors that I have seen like this is, again, this passive-aggressive behavior where one department is attacked by another department because the other department isn't that strong either. But if all the focus gets put someplace else, then there's not that much attention on it. Do be aware that meetings do have politics and dynamics, particularly when you start up to get more strategy instead of just more down where every day you know what you have to do and how to do it. So there are politics in meetings. Do be aware of them. Do be aware that sometimes people use bad behavior, and don't let that impact your career. So attendance problems. I don't think we need to read through them. We all know what some of them are. The one who comes late, the one who leaves early, the one who isn't engaged, the cell phone user, and all this list up here. So in the beginning, when you send out the agenda, if somebody can't, if they come back and say, you know, I can make it for 15 minutes, but I can't make it all the time, just say, is there someone in your department you can send? Or we will update you afterwards, or something like that. So as you look at these, pick some out, but this one right here, I would say start on time. In some cultures, on time, this is really the kicker, in some cultures, on time is 15 minutes late, or when we get there. And in other cultures, if you're not there 10 minutes early, you're late already. It's balancing those cultures that sometimes gets me challenges, and even individuals. So that is the end of So on our computers is a file, and I think I can give you to it. Office 2013. Does everybody have their computers on? So the first place we go is Microsoft Office 2013. And then once we get into there, we'll go to 2013 again. So Office 2013 again. And then we'll go to the management series. Then we'll go to the effective meetings. And there's the meeting agenda template.
What's after management series?
Management series, and then up at the top is the effective meetings. Is it working for you?
Yeah.
Everybody there? Take that to be a yes. In this little file is the development tool, the development worksheet, and then just a simple agenda template. I really do. I have this laminated now, and I really look at this. And even if it's an informal meeting that's only 15 minutes, the thing that I'm most clear on is what I want to come out of that. What I need from everybody. And so for me, just identifying that scope has been a critical thing for me. So for example, let's say we go back to our on-time performance discussion. Say for example, we've got a problem in a certain area. I am crystal clear before I call the meeting on what that area is and how we're going to fix it, or who needs to help us fix that. In the past, it might have been something more like, oh, on-time performance is down. We've got to have a meeting to talk about on-time performance being down. Do you see the difference between the meeting is not about that anymore? The meeting is how we fix on-time performance. And for me, that has been the game changer. Being very, very crystal clear on it. So for example, back here with Lowell, his meeting will perhaps not necessarily be, I need to inform everybody about this. I need to ensure they understand what we're doing. Certainly a different flavor there when you're ensuring versus I just need to give them the information, and if they use it or not, it's up to them. So just those simple changes in what the scope is really does change the meeting. It also changes the intensity of what you're trying to present. So then the next one is the development worksheet. And I just start up here and I start, enter the reason or the purpose for the meeting. Develop an effective and informative meeting title. So how many times have you opened up your email and here comes the meeting announcement and you have no idea what the meeting's about? Catch-up time. Okay, what are we catching up on? Make sure that they, from your title, people understand how they can be prepared. What is the value and the priority of the meeting? This information isn't included in the formal agenda, and it should be part of your thought process. If this is a low priority meeting or it brings little value to the organization, figure out a different way to distribute the information. You can use this simple formula to determine the payback of the meeting. The average wage of all participants times 2. For example, there are 10 participants and the average payroll-related costs are $40. And we did it very simple. And we're doing an hour meeting. That means we need to have $800 in our paycheck to make this an effective meeting. However, with that said, if we make sure that one employee doesn't have an accident, or one order gets shipped on time, because most of our orders are way over $100. Most of the things we do on a daily basis impact a whole lot more than $800. But I guess this is in there to force us all to remember that there's no such thing as a free meeting. Just like that, the first rule of economics is there's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody pays. And that's really, in terms of meetings, there's no such thing as a free meeting. It goes on to say if there's travel costs, include those as well. Many of the meetings that I attend, they'll have 4 or 5 directors and lots of travel costs. You're talking about $50,000 to $70,000 in a meeting. It better be worth a lot. It can't just be, here's my department and this is what we've done over the last year. You know, that can go in an email. And then clear the meeting results expected. So make sure that you know what it is that you want to come out of this meeting. The date, the time, the location, and from here, all of these are easy now. Who needs to provide the information? Once I know what I want, it's pretty easy. So the bottom stuff fills itself out after you get that top stuff done. Then what I do is I bring it over here, only it's a much bigger thing, and I put my information up here, I put my issues, my problems, resolution, and my decisions. Now I have one of these done, so if it's only a decision meeting, it's a much shorter thing. But I always do this because, as Beth mentioned at the very beginning, actions and follow-up are the things that we lose on a meeting. This very simple format makes me record those actions and follow-up. And so it works well for me. I'm not saying that this type of thing will work for everyone, but the thought process behind it does. So if I have problem resolution, if I can add some things here, and these are the actions and follow-up, and this is who's responsible. Many times in the problem resolution, really great ideas come up. Things that we could get better in other ways that aren't necessarily part of this meeting. There's many times that this area really brings a lot of value. Same thing with issues. That's where best, our own personal agendas can be captured there as well. So what I'd like us to do for the next 10 minutes, because you guys are going to be quick at this, I'd like us just to divide up by tables. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That gives us, we have 12 tables, 2 in each. Take the agenda template and come up with a quick agenda for something. And if it can at all relate to what you're doing, so much the better. So, for example, back here, if it could relate to one of your information, if it could relate to one of your meetings, or I don't know if you need this for your stand-up, but it could help, even just having a little bit of structure there. Utilize them to be something that you deal with. And if you're not the one that calls meetings, take a look at the last meeting you attended and utilize that as your, how could this meeting, what can we do with this meeting? Meeting on benefits, and meeting on procedures, and meeting on policies, those types of things. You have plenty of opportunities with what you're trying to accomplish in a new organization. Back here, Marina and Beth, same thing. Find something that's very applicable to what you're doing and present it. And we're going to give everybody about 2 to 3 minutes to present their agenda, and also if you have any learning from that, or if you feel like the tools are weak, what can you do better? Okay? Thank you. So till a quarter till?
Oh, no, we're starting. I was just, sorry. Okay, let's see.
Yes.
What's our agenda? Just one. Yeah.
Since I have
But we also have
We're going to have all these.
So I don't know, that's what.
If you give any back to the, do you want to keep that page over? Sure. Okay. So let's say it's
I'm guessing you take the time to know what you expect from that.
Are you guys making any decisions?
So we met previously, the supervisors, the decision is tentatively.
Okay, so the decisions, you already done that, but this is kind of, yeah.
Their movements come together.
So maybe it makes sense.
That's one thing, I think we were, that's good, we just redirect them back to, you know, okay, well, this means we on this, and then when people start bringing us, okay, we'll discuss that. Or, okay, well, you can come out, that, we'll go ahead and discuss this. There's a lot of times it's always personal things, that figure out, yeah, that drives it, so. And then we see a lot of like the warehouse, it's always seniority, sometimes seniority basically. We've got guys that are friends, and they'll talk to us, want to argue their points to us, and something to, but we always have improvement, but it's like, okay, I was okay, I'm gonna run this. Yeah, but I know you're kind of problem. So mine discussion starts going crazy.
That's what I'm doing.
So information,
So you feel
My boss will be there. Sometimes he kind of just throws a wrench. As soon as somebody brings up a point, he's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, do it that way, that way. And the goal here is that we're all just the same process.
well, maybe it's not really down.
My boss, Jim.
It's done.
So I actually took his job, and he was in to do something different. He's in charge of all the cameras, all the physical security.
So that's not under,
It's like he's kind of just like a weird branch off. He's still under the board. He doesn't really have any
Okay, so that's very complex.
He's got a few people.
well, even his office, one of his offices, we have one, that's the warehouse. Talking to his. But does he only have two offices?
He has one in every division, so there's a guy in Washington, Oregon, two in California, one in Idaho. So like five. And there's a few technicians.
Like you're parking that away.
Yeah.
He's got.
And how you can follow up.
Part of this is we decided previously that the board was scrutinized. Whether or not if it can be. We want to approach people with contact.
You're still taking it,
Okay.
during this part.
How do I, should I just like push stop? Like do I just push right here?
It's a nice name, though. You're going to share theirs first. We'll work our way up. Then, and so we'll finish over here with Man and Tracy. So here, back this way, and this way. Snake around. So, thank you. If you'll come on up. If you want to just present from there, that's good too.
Is that from here? Make everyone turn around and look at me, Kirby. Thank you.
about
It's turning back to his head on me.
I'm gonna get a haircut.
I got one. You didn't say anything about mine.
It looks nice. It just, it's a new year.
It is. Added a little perm. Really pulled it all together. So what I did is I summarized, I put my meetings together. My meetings are held bi-monthly, scheduled all the way out. Everybody knows when they're going to be, what time they are. I have agendas for all of them. One thing I don't do, and after reading on the board, I should do is send the agenda out ahead of time. It seems silly now, but I just don't do it. It's one of the ones I create it throughout the 2 weeks. Every time something comes up, I go on there and I add it in, and then the day before I go and refine it. But what I do is, we have, the meeting starts, we do start right on time, start at 10 o'clock. We do a roll call, just to make sure everyone's there. The first items up are the statistics. So for the last 2 weeks, I roll through how many tickets came into our queue, how many tickets were closed. I also break down per division how many front-end tickets there are. Anything dealing with a register that a customer may see, I have that on there. So every division knows how many they have at any point in time. The goal is to have it at 0 all the time, always an achievable goal. So when you store it, they all dump them in at once. But that way we all know where we're at. I also do outline every single tech as far as their percentage of closed tickets. Don't share it out on the conference call, but they know it's there, so if they want to call me and ask, I'll tell them. Then we go into the department updates. What is going on, items brought down by my boss or my boss's boss that we need to change, items that have been found from other techs at stores, or odd information, or if a manager has told them, hey, we're seeing this problem on the register, or this problem on the computer, I'll present it to see if anybody else has seen it. A lot of cricket going on in that point. They were quiet, so it's a lot of probing to try and get it out. We'll then move that into basic information going on out there, like the customer excellence that came down from Cherrier and Goddard. Also basic items. Keep me informed if we're going to have overtime. Let me know what's going on at the store if a manager comes up and complains. I'd much rather hear it from them before I get it from the manager or my boss than the other way around. Then we go over projects. And the projects we have, the progress of the project, how much more we have to do, timelines. At that point is when we do get more involved on action items. I'll be talking with the techs. What is your plan for getting it done in the timeline that we were given or that we agreed on? Then we go into a general Q&A. So during all this, there is question and answer, but it pertains to the topic on hand. When it starts to get out, I'll tell them, okay, we'll get to that. Let me make a note of it. Like I was telling Abby, I'll intentionally move my keyboard closer to the phone, and I'll type. And I type louder so they know I'm actually putting it in. And I'm not doing it like here I spelled something, but I'll actually type it, but I do it a little louder so they know I'm not just blowing smoke up their ass. So I'm actually putting it in. We do come back and talk about it after the fact in the general Q&A component. And at the very end, when everything's done, I package it up in a PDF file and it's posted on the Linko site for the techs to see. So the last 3.5 years or something like that, meeting notes are all placed up if anybody needs to go and look at it. So that's how we put this together. Question? Or I always ask the techs, I'll ask them questions, comments, or complaints, just to see if anybody has anything.
How long do your meetings generally go?
1 hour. I aim for about a half hour for the meeting, and about 15 minutes for the Q&A, and then a 15-minute buffer just in case something goes one way or the other.
Actually, the timing of this class is pretty extraordinary because I'm about to have my annual meeting that we would typically have in the summer, but due to circumstances, we've moved it up, and a lot of the things that have been covered have been really helpful just to bring my awareness to how to structure things. So with that in mind, the primary function and the purpose of this meeting, beyond the normal boilerplate stuff that we would typically do, is to express the outcomes of a previous meeting with supervisors relating to safety issues that our guys face. The idea, the objective, the purpose here is that we're going to explain to them, get buy-in for why it's important that we adapt our approach and implement some of these things. And then we're going to go through and explain it in a way that everybody understands, with personality types in mind, and looking at the content. I know or could foresee the different discussion points and the different feedback, I guess, is what we're going to see happen during the meeting. So it's kind of great to know that there's a structure that can help keep all of that on pace. But essentially what we want to do is we want to get them together. They're all strewn out and they encounter different stores, different circumstances, different dynamics. The idea is that we get everybody and their personal response on behalf of Winco on the same page, and the consistency is our outcome, as well as safety and getting everybody on point. So that is the idea. I've never presented the agenda ahead of time or done more than just in-person follow-up. So I think that would be a great addition, is to keep everybody, they're all traveling in, so they would have time to reflect on the information beforehand so that they can participate better, and then as well as share with them the follow-up and the expected result, and keep the content lively, because once everybody's strewn back out, they're out there on their own again. So I want to keep them all engaged as one of the group dynamic going forward.
You know, also those yearly meetings are about relationship building too. That's certainly getting great time. It's much better to get it before than after. Oh, wow, I wish I had that. So it's great. Thanks for sharing. Randy and Chloe.
All right.
Great, it always comes back to me. But one of the ones that we recently have come up with is our data collection, because of our clinic, the way it's set up, it's funded with grants, and in order for us to receive those grants, we need to meet collection as far as the demographic information we collect. So one of the things that we've come up to is that people really don't like getting told, you know, you're not collecting this, or we need to work more on this or that. Because one of the things is that I don't think they really understand why they need to collect the data that they collect. And so the agenda that we created was something pertaining to that, the importance of why you're collecting the data from the patient that you're collecting, how to collect the data. So basically getting to know why they're doing it, how to collect it, why it's important, and where are we at? Because they do need to meet a goal as far as when they get audited on collecting that data. They need to meet a 95% goal. And if they're not there, why are they not there? What are you missing? What do we need to do to help you out? Type of stuff. So the agenda is basically put around that. How can we get everybody there and letting them know what are we missing? Why are we missing it? And how can we not miss it? Kind of thing.
So for you, it's called a static, but the real scope of this is behavior changes and performance improvement, right? Yeah. So when you look at that scope, that's really everything on that agenda, although it's called a staff meeting, should be okay. Help me understand why this is happening, and then vice versa, how are we going to make this happen? We're not going to get paid. So your scope, although it says staff meeting, is something different. So that's very well done. Thank you. Okay, so back here with Isabella and Julie.
We're just gonna go over one of the meetings that we're gonna have in about 3 or 4 months. Just go over the changes and the upgrades and how it impacts your work. That's the purpose of the meeting. We're gonna have a system upgrade. And so the information is just upgrading of our AP system. Well, it's a government AP, but we're concerned with AP system.
not making the decision.
We didn't make the decision to upgrade the system, but it's the decision they made. I see it benefits us in the end. I mean, you can't always, like, for example, Excel, you can't be staying at 1995. If you like, had my way, I'd probably never upgrade, but it's necessary.
Well, so knowing that this is your meeting, before you get into that meeting, you already know there's some patterns. How many of you can be in a meeting? 7, 12?
Maybe like 12, 15,
All right. So some of the ones that always are surprising, who generally has the biggest challenge with change? The studies. And the studies are usually very good at their jobs, right? Because they've invested in them and spent the time and learned everything about it. The interesting thing is when we do computer changes, it's generally the studies that get thrown a bit because they have invested so much in getting them. So be aware of your normal non-problem children. They'll never probably be problem children, but they're going to be anxious. Does that make sense? They're going to be anxious because they're interested in controlling their life and making sure that things march ahead steadily, so that they will be the one that are a bit anxious. And change, managing change is always easy. And so many times you nailed it where you said, well, I didn't necessarily decide on the change, I'm implementing the change. It's an interesting role. So our last.
Make this short.
Oh, okay.
So my leads are going to be sitting with their team members, I would say each individual team member, so I would say that's me. And I'm hoping they get out of it, the purpose would be to find more efficient ways of making it work better, or even finding any issues that need to be addressed. So as they're doing this, they would have to obviously know their disc personalities, and I would recommend them to have their own agenda. Once they're sitting with each individual team member, what is it that they want to learn about their jobs? And once they sit with their team members and they found if we do have issues that need to be addressed, then we'll meet and we'll talk about what they went through with the team members, and then we'll see if we can make some decisions.
So, for clarity for me, is this more of a mentor relationship or a buddy relationship?
Mentor.
Okay. Just sounds like a very good fit. So, before we close, and we need to do this Winco way, get it done and get it over so we don't draw this out. I'm going to close with what I think is a very good objective lesson. It was for me yesterday. So I do what Kirby did. I was pulling all this information out and kind of mulling it over last week. And I called a meeting about documentation, always a driving thing, how we were going to get documentation right for this individual thing. We walked into the meeting, and that situation had pretty much solved itself. 5 minutes, and the meeting was done, essentially. However, 2 other issues of very importance came up in that time frame. And they were about procedures and policies and breakdowns and what that does to the interaction of people. Does that make sense? So, in a nutshell, what had happened is we have seed that needs to go everywhere in the world. And we have trial plans that people send in saying, send our seed everywhere in the world. But what happens when it isn't inspected for that part of the world and we can't ship it there? What happens is one person says, we got to ship this. They said we had to get this there. And another person says, no, we can't do that. We don't, we can't, we just can't. Many of our what appear to be personal interactions that go awry are about policies and procedures and about the work itself and not about the people. The same thing applies in those meetings, in the meetings that you have. bad term about something that's happened and not the individuals in the room. So in any meeting you're directing, make sure that at some point you crystal clear hone in on what is that root cause. And it's not the two people battling it out in the room. It will probably be whatever is driving their behavior. So I need to get this done, and you need to get this done, and they're at odds. So, thank you. Meetings are clearly something that are very important for us to manage. I feel like this tool can help us. If you need any help from me, send a message to the group and I'll give it to you. But even if you have a one-on-one phone call that you really need some information to come out, take it down and write, what do I need out of this call? And I guarantee you, you won't forget it and hang up and go, oh, I'm still missing what I needed to get my job done. Just that little bit of discipline about what is the scope. So anyway, thank you all. Have a great day, be safe, and let's just change those meetings.